Hello! In poker there are standard hands, there are some interesting hands, and there are hands that are pieces of art. Today we're gonna look at one of the sickest hands painted by two great artists, Juan Pardo, aka MalakaStyle, and Dejan Kaladjurdjevic. It comes from GG Millions, a 10k buy-in tournament with almost $1.5 million first prize. It's a clash of two biggest stacks and starts with a raise from a small blind. Here on the left we can see the ICM range, and on the right there is the chip EV range for small blind. If we compare them, we can see that on FT, Juan can play 100% of hands, but solver, in contrary to chip EV spot, prefers to limp with all Queen-Jack suited. But if we look closer, there is no visible equity difference between both plays, so it's not a big deal. Now we can look at the big blind range versus open, and we can see that there is almost no raising with smaller sizing, and the only hand that wants to do it for value is pocket aces. And even kings want to flat in that spot. There is more jamming, with all ace queens and ace kings, because we don't really want to put ourselves in a spot where we 3-bet them and after 4-bet we would be in an awful ICM situation. They're balanced with some bluffs with best blockers, lowest ace-x offsuit and some offsuit kings. We see a call, and on the flop small blind should check most of his hands. He has a nut advantage because he has all ace-kings, aces and kings, but on other hand it doesn't offset that he is so wide here, with 60% of hands and a lot of air. If we look at chip EV range, we can see the difference. He should be c-betting that flop very often, because in that scenario he's not only having a nut advantage, but also overall range advantage. In game we see 1BB c-bet, and that is preferred sizing by a solver. Big blind should do some raising, and there is almost no folding versus that small sizing. The only hand that prefers raise over call is pocket kings, but there is some raising for value with all aces. Big blind should raise here with a lot of trash too, doing it with some frequency with almost every hand in his range, including holdings like 10-6 of clubs or Jack-3 of spades. The raise sizing used here is also very small, so MalakaStyle should continue here with a lot of hands, with everything that has some backdoor equity, hands as weak as Jack-4 off with 4 of hearts or 7-5 suited with backdoor diamonds. On the turn we get a very interesting card.
Looking like the Jack of Hearts.
It completes flush draw, some straight draws, and gives some equity to most of the hands that had some backdoor draws. After check, big blind should bet with almost half of his range, still value betting most of aces and almost all flushes. But we can also see that a lot of bluffs here are hands with no equity, like 8-5 of clubs or 9-7 of spades. After that bet, Juan should mostly call. There is some small amount of raising, and it's split into two sizings. Flushes and straights prefers all-in sizing, and that is balanced with some best combo draws, like Queen 5 off with Queen of Hearts or 10-6 off with 10 of Hearts, that blocks some calls and still have some equity when called. There is only one hand that really likes to raise with small sizing, and it's pocket kings. It gets more value from trip aces, because versus jam, big blind should fold some aces, and also kings aren't that afraid of being outdrawn. Versus small sizing, big blind should continue for example with all Queen-Jack with Queen of Hearts, and versus jam it's a pure fold, and against that hand our kings can potentially lose only to one outer. If we zoom in on Queen-Jack without hearts, there is actually like 1 pixel of pink, so that raise from Pardo can't be that bad, but it's rather an unorthodox play, and his best bluffs here should include Queen of Hearts. After a small raise with so low SPR, the big blind shouldn't raise in position too much, and it's a call with all ace-x hands. On the river, we're getting into some muddy waters. It's such an unusual situation that the solver doesn't show all these hands with marginal frequencies. We're actually in a node that all hands doesn't even add up to one full combo, and when we change view to proportional, we barely see them. So we should take these strategies with a grain of salt. Anyway, solver wants to block bet mostly with ace-x and straights, and go all in with full houses and some nut flushes, and using hands like jack-10 or king-jack as a bluff. Versus small bet, solver wants to jam all full houses and all flushes, because they beat most of block betting range, and call most of ace-x, but we can see that it's actually indifferent what we will do with them. If we look at bluffs, solver never uses ace-x because they're good enough to call, and sometimes they beat a bluff or split the pot and prefers hands that made 3 pairs as a bluff, like king-10 or jack-10, that are almost never good on showdown. If we look at small blind strategy, we don't see all the combos, but we can see a pattern here. Solver calls all flushes and folds all ace-x. With straights it's on the edge, and the solver calls half of them. Juan Pardo here is just getting a great price on a call, and if big blind has any bluffs, and Dejan certainly does, he can call here. That's the theory, but in practice this spot on the river is very tricky. Versus some players it might be the easiest bet fold in the world, and versus others it might be an easy call. We don't really know how Pardo would play, for example, his ace-king. Solver actually never raises it on the turn, but in human mind it could actually make sense to check raise it on the turn to build the pot. Is he ever betting it with that small sizing on the river? What does he think about Dejan's range? He should never have absolute nuts. Is he ever raising with weak flushes here? What does he do with straights? We can think about this spot on so many levels, and that's why this hand is so interesting. All I can say is that both players showed some big balls on the river. I hope you enjoyed this hand, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and see you next time. Bye.